Hello, Avila Advantage students. It's hard to believe we're already in week 4, so we're approaching the halfway point of the course. This week you will have an exam, and it will just cover the chapters that will be covered in the first 3 weeks. So there'll be 50 questions. It will be in a Word document, and what you will do is just on a one-page Word document, just submit your letter responses for each question. So it would be like 1 is A, 2 is A, 3 is A. So just put your name on a Word document and all those responses, and that's how we'll do it. So and the exam will be out there available to you on Monday, and you'll have it through the week to work on it. It just needs to be submitted before Sunday at midnight. Good job with the forum discussions. This week with the forum discussion, week 4, I'm going to keep it very light because I know you do have a test. And then also you'll be covering and looking at chapters 9, 10, 11 in the current economics textbook. But with these topics addressed is first, it looks at the overall ability for nations to create growth and wealth. And of course, certain nations do have other resources available to them. They can be physical resources or they can be infrastructure. We're really lucky in the United States that we have both the history and the institutions such as the Federal Reserve and our government, and things are relatively stable here, and we do have a lot of good resources that can provide jobs. That's still a concern out there. Even our Federal Reserve chairman, our new chairman, Janet Yellen, she tends to be more of a dove and is concerned with unemployment, and we see unemployment about 6.6%, so they're still looking for improvements in unemployment. So it's kind of how can we master these things of GDP, inflation, unemployment, try to provide a stable environment, to try to provide growth. That's what a lot of this chapter looks at. The first chapter is looking at the world and different opportunities that different nations have. In chapter 10, we look at that and kind of get more into the aggregate demand, aggregate supply analysis. Talked about the shape of the aggregate demand curve, based on what we call like the interest rate effect, the wealth effect, or the real balances effect for the shape of why it's downward sloping. And then what can cause the aggregate demand curve to change? It could be, the best way to look at it is kind of what we looked at previously in the aggregate expenditures approach, is that any change in consumption, income, government expenditures, or net exports can shift that. And then of course you also look at the aggregate supply curve in this chapter, kind of recognizing that the aggregate supply curve in the long run is kind of a straight up and down, we would say like a vertical sloped curve, because there's limitations to how much we can produce in a given time period. Now over time, these dynamic shifts in aggregate demand and aggregate supply can allow for more output in the economy. But our last chapter kind of looks at the classical versus Keynesian schools of thoughts of economics. They talk about the conditions in order for the classical school to work. The idea in the classical school is kind of the laissez-faire, hands-off. The idea that prices and equilibriums will adjust, that there's perfect competition, perfect information, markets are efficient, people are rational self-thinkers when it comes to economic decisions. But as we kind of watched in that video, the mind over money in the first week, where Keynes moved in, kind of was prevalent at that time period after the Great Depression. He says, hey, we need a government interaction. We can't wait. He'd say, in the long run, we're all going to be dead. So he advocated for more government interventions in markets to create more spending to try to stimulate aggregate demand. That could be through fiscal policy, either through direct government spending, or it could be by reducing taxes. And within this chapter, you'll kind of see, what would be considered like a Keynesian range, that a kind of a flat aggregate supply curve that kind of says, hey, because we're not at a full level of output, I can still continue to increase aggregate demand without having too many real impacts on the price level, inflation, and until at some point I reach that long run point. And if I were to push beyond that, it could actually result in no change in output and just increases in inflation. So, well, that's a brief summary of different things that you'll be reading about this week. But again, do send me an email and canvas if you have any questions. Otherwise, have a great week. And you said after this week, we're halfway through the course, so we're moving right along. So take care, and we'll talk to you online.